Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen. He is Brandon. Like, comment, and subscribe. Find us at the links below. Today's topic is meatpacking update from this past week's Senate hearings. And then we'll take a spin about halfway through and we'll switch to some positives of COVID within the ag industry over the last year. So, number one, we talked about meat packers. We talk about it regularly here. Some other updates were I went to Drovers, DROVERS.com, and they do a lot of stuff when it comes to cattle industry and meat packing. And frankly, they talked about how two of the four big meat packers in the United States were brought to the Senate to discuss their side of the perspective when it comes to meat packing and meat production in the U.S. We've talked many times about how simply they've been really monopolizing a lot of meat production, and then they're about at least from the media's perspective and how they've been saying it, it's stated about 80% of all production goes through them, so it's very significant. So just getting to some of my notes here. Starting out the hearing, with the Senate hearing updates, I wanted it noted that I knew we would lose the attention of the American public, and I think that occurred. You know, things with like COVID, the Olympics, and the latest infrastructure bill, because they are all notable events. But our time to shine is kind of gone. Um, the only reason I know about the Packers in the Senate hearing is because of my Twitter account. That's why I have it. And I regularly check on some of these other sources. But what's important is I did get to see this update, and that's why we do it on here, so we can update anybody who's willing or interested to listen to what we have to say from the producer's perspective. So here's some things I pulled from the 3-minute highlight reel from Drovers, and then also the article that was kind of expanding on the article or the video. One, after being asked how to justify low bids, the Tyson president, so the Tyson meatpacking business, that president said, "We rely on independent ranchers and cattle producers. The conditions are all based on the market." How the producer determines how to sell their cattle is on them. Essentially saying, hey, if they decide to go through the ring like we normally do, or they negotiate and they set up a contract or something like that, hey, that's on them. That's not us. We're just going based off what the market is. Okay, we'll get there.
Don't they create the market?
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. Okay.
The other part was independent producers are all allowed the same options. JBS says that it's a cash basis. Okay. Politicians are looking into the antitrust enforcement. So the trust busting that occurred in the early 1900s, they're looking at utilizing some of that legislation to bust up the monopolies of the meatpacking industry. I personally did not see any rebuttals that I could tell from any of the producers. I heard that there were some rebuttals, but again, it's whoever's the last one standing or the last one to say something tends to be the one that gets heard. It seems like. And then one quote was,
first liar doesn't stand a chance.
Yeah, there you go. And then the other one was, this is a quote: "Oh, we only produce 70% of all the owned beef production, not 85%." Okay. And then the final one that really got me was market fundamentals show that they drive the beef markets, not the other way around. So, really my part is they've kind of wormed their way around it by saying this is our perspective, and really we're not producing quite how everybody else is saying it, and it's all market based. Well, like you said, market, they drive the market based off of how they're pulling, and we know some of the ways they're doing it, but it's just very frustrating.
Well, yeah.
So
that's the whole issue of the antitrust. You create the market and you say, well, this is the market. You can go this way to get to it, or you can go through this way to get to it. You can do it any way you want. That's all up to you, but this is the market we created.
Right.
So that's what you get. How you get to us is your business. And that's free. We don't force you to do that. I mean, they are politicians themselves. They are liars.
Yeah.
And they are absolute deceivers, and they are unapologetic about it. In fact is, they're apoplectic if anybody calls them out on it, because like, oh, we would never lie about this. This is not true. And it is absolutely true. I mean, You know, when politicians are doing that, they're just taking their lead from them. It's the
Yeah.
same old stuff in that room. It's just who's lying first.
Yeah. So I guess to start off on that first note, um, when being asked to justify low bids, the Tyson president said, "We rely on cattle producers. The conditions are based on the market. How the producer determines how to sell their cattle is on them." So, what would you say to that if you were to have a face to face with the president of Tyson?
You tell me where there's a second market to go to.
Right. And I would
Show
say
it to me.
if I were him, I would probably say, well, you can always sell it outside of the United States.
No, you can't. No, you can't. You can't as a producer, you cannot create trade with another country. That's a governmental. That's the feds that do that.
That's true, but I guess his argument would probably be, um, well, you can do a contract with somebody from like Canada, right? Potentially.
You probably could. You could have them buy it, but are they going to come down here and pay you when they can ship their cattle down here and be
No,
part of
I
the
agree.
problem, flood our markets
Yeah, I
and
agree.
drop the price? It's the same thing.
Um,
Who's in charge of all of the packing in Canada?
what do you mean?
Do they have outlets in Canada? Does
Oh, I don't know.
JBS, does
I couldn't tell you.
National? I mean, Tyson. I bet it's the same. Of course, you know, I don't know what the Canadians what they do for their trade like that because frankly, it's hard enough to keep up on ours. But
Right.
NAFTA, for instance, was a great sucking sound of um, our economy going both to Mexico and Canada in about 1990, 92. And then Trump did some good there and tightened that up a little bit. Well, that's all going to go by the wayside again now. So
The
yeah,
other part is he says how the producer determines how to sell their cattle in the sense of ring, negotiated, or contract. Just trying to expand based off of what we've already talked about in the last couple minutes. Uh, I guess can you try to explain how those are different, but they're not?
well, yeah, that's again, he's playing word games.
Yeah,
So if Tyson, for instance, and this was the executive from Tyson, if they're buying cattle and they're buying from a feedlot or they purchase them themselves, and this often
which
happens, is
is
that they
happening right now. It's what's helping
yes,
keep it at the lower market right now. Yeah.
right, they have their own feedlots. So we sell our cattle to either you can go through a public auction yard or you can get a broker to purchase those cattle who goes directly to a feedlot. Or some people are, you know, they'll raise stocker cattle. So I left that part out. Stocker, or uh, they'll take the calves, 600 to 700 pound calves that we have, and they'll put them on grass for 3, 4, 5 months. They'll get them up to around that 1,000 pound mark and 1,100 pounds, and they sell them to a feedlot that puts a finish on them, puts another, say, a couple 100 pounds on them, and then they go to slaughter. So the feedlot, if that's owned by Tyson, JBS, National, Cargill, those big four guys, if they own those feedlots and they own a lot of them, or they're contracted to other feedlots that are independent, small guys, and they're going, you know what? Yeah, we'll give you this much, but everybody else can't make a profit because they're, again, I think we talked about this on another broadcast, was that JBS feedlot manager that was there for several years was making $4 per head profit. Okay, when you're doing that, all you're doing is as part of your processing. You're just fattening them up to make little to nothing and squeeze out everybody else who's trying to do it for profit. And you're holding them down, you're suppressing that market so that nobody can make any money or be a viable business in that. So they can then take that carcass or take that animal, slaughter it, and now it's a carcass. And now they can go ahead and inflate the cost of that because, again, they control the market. They control how much that animal is going to get after it leaves them as a boxed beef product or a product that's basically cut into all steaks, all hamburger, all ribs, you name it, whatever they process it as. And that is sold to your Albertsons, Kroger's of the world, who then process at Costco's, and they have their own processors there where they're just cutting it into smaller pieces and packaging it. They're telling them this is what it costs to buy a box of beef from us. So they're controlling the market on that end. They're controlling also the market at the buyer's end, where they are finishing these animals, or they've got a select few that finish, and anybody else, who are you going to go to? They've got to make a profit, so they can't buy the cattle that we have, or a stalker or backgrounder type business, because all of our ranches are so different and so unique, depending on where they're at in the country and the kind of grass they have, whether they have outlets for finished cattle. Like us, we're a cow-calf operation. That's what we do. And so we don't finish them. We're not set up to finish them. That could change. You never know. We might be forced to do that. But the problem with that is you are still sending those animals to a market that is controlled. And so we are getting less and less for our animals, or the same amount for them with higher costs to produce them on the other end. And you can't continue to operate in the red very long before you're out of business. And that's where it's at. Yeah, you can take it. You can go to a broker. That broker is going to, for instance, say, okay, again, I'm Mr. Tyson, and we have our feedlot over here, but you know what? You don't have to sell to us. We got somebody else over there, and you got a broker that you can go to. Who are they all going to? They're still going through JBS, who is setting the market price.
Right.
And depending on, you may or may not have a little bit better relationship with them if you're one of their feedlots, preferred feedlot, that they're going, you know what? We're okay. We're not going to piss them off, because if we do, they'll find other feedlots, and we're barely able to make it. We will do it. So we're just going to go along with it, and hopefully we can get through this. Well, and that is a control.
The other control too that people don't understand as well is that these packers also utilize producers to minimize their operations expenses as well, which is they have those producers hold on to those cattle until it's slaughter time. Now, this is a slightly different chain of the process, but what they'll do instead of buying those animals and taking them immediately is they'll say, hey, we're going to buy the animals, but it's on schedule. And so the animals they buy today on August 4th, 2021 may not even go to the slaughter plant until August or October, November. And so all they're doing is they're having those producers hold on to those animals at their expense. So they've gotten the money. They're like, okay, great, I got money in my pocket, but they're still putting out money to take care of these animals until 2 months, 3 months down the road when they go to the plant to finally get slaughtered and butchered. And they're also suppressing the market by doing that, because they've bought stuff 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and they've already set that price ahead of time. And they're like, you know what? Prices are too high today in month 2 or 3. I already have my cattle incoming. I'll wait until they drop lower. And so it keeps stair stepping down, and they're forcing prices to drop because they're scheduling out like that as well.
Meanwhile, when we've talked about this before, our feed costs go up. Just because you sell that animal and that animal is scheduled for delivery doesn't mean it quits eating.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying, is they're utilizing the expenses of the producers.
Yes, that's right.
Moving on, I saw the other thing too was it was a clip. So, there's a lot of stuff that happened within a day or a couple of days, but I didn't see any rebuttals from producers like us. Now, it was the producers and some key representatives from the cattle industry about a month ago that said, hey, here's the issues, here's the facts, here's the statistics that back up our claims. This is what we are coming here to grieve about, and we need assistance from the government in breaking these trusts up. Again, kind of what you said is the first liar is the one that's not heard. In this case, if we are the liars, we're the first ones. And so we're not getting told, or we're not going to get necessarily in court, I would say, because in a sense, there's no rebuttal to say, hey, these claims are inaccurate, especially when they say things like, well, we only own 70% of the market, not 85. That's not that big of a difference, man. Like, that's still a
That's
considerable amount.
that is ridiculous. Yeah, that's like, I didn't steal all your money, just most of it.
Yeah. Yeah, just most of it.
So yeah, that, and anytime you want something to come out and have a light shed on it, you have to have a rebuttal to those arguments, and they should rebut what we have to say.
Right.
Let those facts come out. Let those statistics, and I hate statistics, but let them fall where they really are. Let's show what actually happens and where it goes. That's true rebuttal.
Yeah.
When you're saying, oh, it's, they have options for the markets, they can go somewhere else and do that. Kind of like the arrogance that is in abundance with those guys is something that happened at the local level with me, with one of ours. Said, you don't like what we do here, go somewhere else. Really? You own all of the auction yards.
Yeah.
Where am I supposed to go? And with a smirk on this young guy, I don't even know if the owner knows he said something like this, but it's like, you punk. And that's what they're doing. They're just corporate punks.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate because, I mean, now it's going to take, and we've had this discussion with others, but unfortunately, instead of people being good and utilizing some ethical and moral grounds to correct themselves, now we have to look to the government to say, hey, this is wrong and let's fix this. That should never come to fruition, but now here we are looking at laws that were created actually about a century ago.
Yeah.
And trying to enforce those yet again on 4 major meat packers in order to fix this. And I don't know what other industries have this issue. I'm sure it's not just the ag industry, but I bet you the tech industry is one of them. That's a big one right now.
I'm sure of it.
The fact that we're coming back to a century later, these same issues, it's very disturbing and it's very upsetting because you're creating, one side of the aisle talks about having very differing classes of people within the United States. And this is causing more and more of that when you create this, because you're taking all the wealth. First of all the wealth, taking it from the producers who are the ones working and trying to earn just a decent amount of living. And then you're taking all of their money and then you're taking it outside the United States. That's the worst part. Most of this isn't going back to the United States. It's going right outside the country into places like Brazil. Where do we talk about? Brazil, and was one out of Europe, if I remember right. We had
There's a little bit of, there's some Chinese. Look at that.
Oh well.
Wardrobe well
We're gonna
function.
keep rolling.
My God. But yeah, China has got their hand in some of this too.
Yeah.
Especially on the side of the export or import. Which they're also don't think that they're just there selling a product.
Right.
And purchasing a product for profit. They are also well into controlling markets in other countries.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what the solutions are. I'm glad these are being brought up. But again, it does create an issue of we had our moment to shine, but we're losing it. There's going to need to be something to keep this going. Because what I fear the most about is that we do have this this thing we have people who are engaging, who are trying to drive forward, who are trying to take care of producers, make sure everything's right. However, when the public perspective or the public support is no longer there, how much further are our representatives going to continue to drive without having that fuel from the support system? That's really where I start to get concerned, because it's great that they're continuing after this, and I see, because I'm seeing movement forward, but I am concerned that eventually the faith that we have in them going forward with it is going to eventually pedal out, and that they're not going to have anything to actually come to fruition in terms of support to the producer and making sure this actually gets enforced through antitrust laws.
Well, you got a multi-pronged issue there. I think that one, we've got a perception issue. I think the general public, when they hear of farmers and ranchers, what's one of the first things they think of?
They're rich. They're wealthy.
They're rich. They're a John Dutton with the Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And Hollywood has not done us any favors.
Mm-mm.
They glorify and glamorize our lifestyle, and it is anything but glamorous. There is a mystique to it. I'll give you that. There's not a lot of people that do what we do in an overall, in a general sense, because we're only a couple of percent family owned farms and ranches. So most people don't even have a clue, and they see television shows or movies and they think we are just wealthy beyond all means. It's like, those guys are getting rich off of us. That's why a steak costs what it costs. That's why hamburger. We can't even have any fancy food. It's got to be hamburger. And these guys are making money off us. And you know what? These packers are more than happy to let that blame go to us.
Oh yeah. Well, and,
then you got
it's very frustrating too, because eventually there won't be meat to say that about.
And that's my point, and that's where I'm headed with the other half of this. Is you've got a lot of people, and some of them in very powerful positions right now, that are like, yeah, let it go. We don't want to encourage beef anyway. We don't want to encourage any meat, and I don't like it. Therefore, nobody else should have it. That's going on in a very, very strong and organized manner right now. Which brings me to a third point, and that is, why are these hearings structured so there is no rebuttal?
Yeah, well, the question is, does that happen all the time? I'm sure it does, but yeah,
then it's a half-assed hearing. It is not there to get to facts.
Well, I think that's the problem. Is there's a lot of I'll play devil's advocate. The government has a lot of issues that it has to try and address, and not enough time. It never will have enough time. But
has the government ever really been the solution to something? They've been the problem to it. They create problems and try to be the solution.
I'm not arguing that they are, but the thing is, if we're gonna have good faith here and say that the government's trying to help and everything, to do it the right way, frankly, it's gonna take at least a year just getting the information, like a good investigation would do. These guys don't have the time for it. How many of them are on multiple committees and hearings? And at some point, it's like being on a jury for 6 different murder trials. Okay, which one am I trying to remember now? And no,
that's a good point.
That's why they have staffs and stuff. It's just that's also the frustrating part is trust me, we have enough politicians, but then at the same time, we don't have enough politicians. Like, we need more to be able to like help us out. But then at the same time, I think this has been created because of our own issues of we've expanded government over the time. And that's part of the reason why we have so many committees and systems in place.
Well, and I think we've also, and I don't care who you are, come to my door. Any one of my state representatives, senators, come to my door, and we'll talk about honesty in who you represent.
Well,
how do these guys go back
what the real life is? Because there's one in particular that says he's a farmer and he's not.
He's not. And why do these people vote the way they do? Because they're lobbied. That's where they're making their money. They're going to go to Washington and they're going to cut a fat hog in the ass. They know when they get elected, it's like, you know what? I may only have one term, but I better make the most of this. And they get compromised by some of these lobbyists and some of the special interest groups. And then the next thing you know, they're doing not what they should be doing for the people that they represent. Not at home, they're doing what they should be doing for the people who pay them to represent them. That's the difference. And I think if you found a handful of our senators and representatives across this U.S. that were not doing that, they're not effective because they don't get chosen for some of these committees and subcommittees and some of the powerful decision makers. And that's why we end up in the spot we are. That's why you don't have real testimony. That's why you don't have real investigations. You have a whitewash show. It's nothing more than a damn puppet show to say, oh, well, we looked into this and this was what we found. No, you found what you were supposed to find because you were told this is what you were going to do because this is what you were paid to find. They are all dirty. And I shouldn't say all, but there is a very small number of our elected representatives in our republic, remember that are clean.
Yeah, well, you said enough, so moving on.
I've said enough.
The other thing too is,
tell me I'm wrong.
I'm not gonna say that. The next question is, do you think this has been optimistic for me, is made me optimist in the terms of getting rid of these trusts. But do you think, or actually how much do you think, if any, will actually come to fruition for breaking up the big four, mainly for meat packing, and improving probably sales, or at least quality of income for farmers and ranchers?
I was young and hopeful once too,
Yeah.
and I saw this happen a number of times.
Okay.
I don't see it. I would hope. I'm hopeful that it will happen, because you know what? Our livelihood depends on it,
Right.
and the livelihood of a lot of people I know. But you can't continue to do this. There'll be some kind of reset. What happened when I was your age, is a great big reset took place, and a lot of guys blew their brains out, literally.
Yeah.
And guess what happened? They were bought by other places, and sometimes they were bought by corporations. At corporate farming, corporate farming is really taken off in the 70s, late 70s or 80s. You know,
Sounds a
hey,
lot like
we can do
factory
this.
farming.
You think? Same damn thing. And that's what they're trying to do. That's the same thing. They're just trying to squeeze more and more people out, and they don't care about you. And the investors, they talk about, what was it? One of his statements was in that article, we care about the trust. You don't buy trust, you prove trust.
Yeah,
We care about, and about what you do.
Yeah.
The other thing that they wanted to do is make sure that their shareholders were happy and taken care of.
Yeah.
And then the third thing was to make sure that we have a bright future. What the hell does that mean?
Well,
a bright future for whom?
Yeah.
Exactly. So they say nothing, and they say things that they really mean, but it's not to be taken the way that that would benefit the people that they're trying to put a boot heel on. And that's the problem. And that they say all of these things. I mean, I've been in the corporate world where your managers, they'll say, "Oh, we care about you. We care about your family." No, they don't. You're just a cog in the wheel. They don't give two hoots in hell about you. And that's what these people are. They're the same way. They are nothing more than a predator standing over the top of you, waiting for you to take your last gasp and do things as efficiently as possible, right to the very end, before that, okay, well, we'll do you a favor and take it over.
Well, I mean, it's all about vague messaging. You know, you can.
Sure
I was watching a comedy. If anybody's interested, very good. Amazon Prime, Alpha House. It's hilarious. It's about politicians actually, and they make fun of them with John Goodman, and it's great. And one of them was they're at like this luncheon, and somebody goes, "Oh yeah, I won't be the problem today," and I was like in my head, I was like, "Yeah, they won't be," and then suddenly like the other character goes, "Wait, who will be the problem?" Like that's exactly it. It's all about the vague messaging.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, it's all right. It's got to be coordinated. Make sure it's coordinated. We talk ahead of time. I have got hopes, because that's all we ride on from year to year is hope.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be better next year. Next year will be better. How many times have we said that? And we mean it. You know, well, it's the same thing. That's where it's at. Is like, I've got hope that it would do something to improve family farms and ranches. That's not what they're wanting. It's not where they're headed. They've got the power to crush us, and they are crushing us.
Yeah. Well, with that, we're about the halfway mark. I'm going to move on to the positives of COVID. So Dad and I actually did a small thing of this last year before we actually start the YouTube thing. We tried it via like Facebook. It was me trying to do things out of a cabin on my cell phone, and hey, you got to do baby steps. So we're going to kind of
it was rougher. It was rougher than it is now, believe it or not, right?
We're getting there. We're getting there. But I got 5 things that I wrote down. And we can just kind of go over them and discuss, and I'll just throw them all out there real quick, and then we can kind of do it. Starting with number 1, meat packers were exposed. Number 2, people kind of understand the food chain process better. They don't understand it nearly as well as they should, but better, I think. Direct beef sales increased, as in like direct consumer to producer. Butchering has become more of a important trade than ever, I think. It's starting to become one of those that's up there with electricians and plumbers. People are realizing that they're very valuable. And then teleconferencing, So things like this, things like you and Suzanne have been working for multiple years, but it's just become more popular, has taken off to new heights that we've never seen before. So those are kind of my big five things. If you were thinking of anything that's not on here that you wanted to throw in there, let me know, but we can just start going down the list.
I think there's a number of social issues like that that have come to light. I think people are a little bit more engaged in the education system
Mm.
when they had to take care of their kids at home, and they're like, "Holy crap,
Yeah, this isn't fun,
man!
man.
What do teachers do? How do they do this?" Because I know what kind of hours your mother works,
Right.
and she's in school. She's been in school here the last month. Um, and it's taking a class, and then she spends the rest of the week doing homework assignments. She's got another one coming up here in the middle of August. She pays for these things or applies for them, and it isn't like she has to do them for recertification. One of them is, but like this one that's coming up is all about robotics. She's teaching herself and spending a tremendous amount of time so that kids can learn better.
Right.
And I think people underestimate. There's a lot of crappy teachers out there. Don't get me wrong. I know some of them. Had some of them in college. Had some of them in high school. But there's I think the large extent are very good. And when they're doing things like that, they're trying hard. They're trying to do what they can to make education for kids better. I mean, that's the whole point. And so I think with people didn't used to see that quite as much, and I think with maybe now that they do, and I think they're overwhelmed and like, I can't wait to get my kid back to school. The only problem with it is, and with all of these things is, we are an instant add water type of society where if it's not in front of us, we forget about it and we go right back to what we were doing,
That's
and
what I've
we
been
don't
saying about the meat
change our
packers.
lifestyles. Yeah, no, you're right. It's exactly the same. So I think people becoming more and more involved in their own life and their kids' life. It's rough because there's a lot of them that don't have the skill to do that, don't have the ability to do that. I mean, and your mom was lucky. A lot of the kids around here were lucky because she was still able to teach. She was doing it from home for a while, but she still had contact with these kids. And it's typical. Those that are unengaged in a classroom are going to be unengaged when they're not having to be in a classroom. Those kids are going to be well suited for life after school, and they take their own lives and their own education responsibility, and they run with it, and they'll be very successful. They'll do great. I think some of the things about what's been going on in our schools has come to light. I think that's pretty good too. If you're not engaged with or haven't been in the past, maybe it's a good thing that your eyes are open, whether you agree with what's going on or not. Not for me to decide. That's up for somebody. But having that awareness of what the hell's going on is important. And there's some things that I'm unaware of. I'm sure that's way outside of my scope of daily, weekly, monthly life that I'm not in touch with and I don't understand. If it affects me, I try to hopefully understand it, but most of the time I don't. I mean, you take something like how is it to commute by train anymore?
Right. Public
I'm
transit
outside
in
of that. And
general.
there's a whole public transit in general, subways. I was on a subway once. Yeah,
Yep.
that was a little interesting, and so those issues of how that's run, how that's done, how that's funded, how that's maintained, that's outside of my thing. I mean, if I was there, I'd be like, ooh, okay, I'm a little bit more into that. So I can't know everything. I don't claim to know everything or everything that's around and affecting everyone else. But some of the things that we do have some commonality to, I try to understand it at least, or have a thumbnail sketch of it. And if I don't understand, I'll ask questions. Say, okay, what, how, and why. In a strange way, I think that probably this has made people, especially this government lockdown, I think it has made people more appreciative of their families and people around them to a certain point, because we're starved for that personal touch.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, by just the conversation now, this again, just as you said earlier, technology has changed that a little bit. I mean, we're able to see and talk to each other. And when you were even in Afghanistan, there were times when we got to see and talk to you, which is
Right.
like, that was crazy. Because I remember when I was a little kid and I had aunts and uncles that were in the military, I didn't hear from them for 2, 3 years. And
Well,
we'd get a phone call.
I mean, even the difference between Afghanistan for me versus Afghanistan for my uncle, who was
Oh,
there,
yeah,
what, 5, 6 years before me.
at
We
least,
we
maybe
were
longer.
lucky to get a phone call. I think we got
Right.
2 or 3 throughout his time because he was focused on talking to his wife
His
and
family.
kids,
Right.
understandably. But there was no such thing as video. Like it was really hard. I think at the time the biggest thing they had was Skype, and it was hard for him to get to a location for Skype. Now for me, I had it on my phone, my smartphone, and I could literally
Right.
just throw in some earbuds and I was able to talk. That's the difference right there. I thought that
Right.
was kind of cool.
Yeah, but it's still not like being in person,
No.
because when you're ready to come home, it's like, oh my God, get a big hug. I mean, you're
Yeah.
there. There's that in person, uh, and people, we're in an interesting age where we are going hard. And I mean,
Mhm.
I think people in cities are going hard. Everybody is going hard. I mean, it's a faster pace than it used to be. And so this forced people to all of a sudden the brakes got hit, stood on, and now you're at home and you're like, God, what do I do? Do I even like these people? They're really getting on my nerves, instead of, just being roommates with a family. Now they're having to spend time together.
Right.
And hopefully, you hope that that's a positive thing for most people, but, and I'm sure that there's not, there's a lot of issues with drug use, alcoholism, tons of problems like that for people to cope with. And I can imagine, how in the hell am I going to pay my bills? I can't make money now because my work has been shut down, or I can't even get to work. There's some horrible things that took place like that. We were very very lucky where life didn't really change for me. I'm I still got animals to feed. I got calves to calve, horses to work. So I'm out and alone, and nobody's going to tell me what to do anyway. Um, so good luck with that. Like one
Well,
tried to. That worked
with
out real well for her.
with that, do you think because of that, like people, I mean, I guess you could argue you're an essential worker in an odd way. Do you think people kind of understand the food process or the chain better? Because like we had early reports of how they were they were having to euthanize just giant herds of swine because they couldn't get them through the meat packing
Right.
process to butcher and stuff like that. So people were like, well, how does this actually work? Why is this happening? Do you think stuff like that had a benefit from COVID? Because I think it did to an extent, because I don't think people understand wholly, like I've said before, but I think it's provided more context and more understanding to what's going on.
I think I really don't think you would know if you were more in tune with that. Like maybe from our perspective of being a producer, you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, they were killing hogs by the thousands because they couldn't process them. They got no feed for them. What do you do? What do you do? And again, the market has dropped because nobody's taking them. You're in a hard spot, and you're in a devastating spot. It's not just a hard spot; it's a devastating spot. So, I think the real tail to that would be a year later. Ask people, hey, what happened with our food supply? Any idea what happened with that when all the COVID shut down, or with all the COVID shutdowns? What did farmers and ranchers do? And I'll bet you most of them would go, those people are real heroes. They just kept doing what they were supposed to do. They won't even remember that
Right.
animals were shot, euthanized. They're not going to remember that. That's what my fear is.
Well, I
I think
think
they
the other
probably have a better appreciation for what we do, but I don't think they see that part of it because they may have heard it, but then it's like, oh,
too much attention. Well, I
yeah,
think the other thing too is you brought up a good point. Is if you were to ask somebody what happened during the shutdowns, I think they're mostly going to go back to things like Iowa and South Dakota, where packing plants were shut down because of COVID issues, and that slowed it down further. And they're going to say, well, COVID just ended up shutting down everything. And it really wasn't COVID. It was the reaction to it because
Right.
Close quarters. And I think the way in which they're managing their people was a very poor way of doing it, but there was also a way of trying to come back too quickly. They were doing a surge. There's a lot of aspects to it, but I think frankly, it was simply the reaction. And so people are going to look more at the meat packing plants and not
Right.
the process. So I didn't think about it that way, but I think that is a good way of kind of
Well,
understanding.
and the other part of that is, and I think we're all like this is just a human nature, is that you tend to personalize it. Okay, what happened to
Right.
me during this?
Right.
Oh, yeah, it was a little hard to get some meat and it was high priced because I think there wasn't enough because of the packing plants. There wasn't getting to the stores. It was there, but it
Right.
wasn't getting to the stores and getting to me. So I think we personalize stuff to the point where, again, we don't look at the larger picture, the holistic aspect of what goes on.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and because of that, I mean, more things such as direct beef sales have increased through the roof.
Right.
Unfortunately, we're not set up to take advantage of it right now. Maybe one day we will be. Um, but more and more people are realizing, hey, I can reach out to local ranchers and I can just buy the beef directly, and it's a win-win for everybody because we're going around the meatpacking industry, getting top dollar for our animal, and they're paying less than they would if they were to, you know, budget all year long for all the steaks that they would get out of that one
Right.
call. I think that
Well,
that is a
and when you say,
huge benefit to us.
well, when you say top dollar, it's not top dollar. It's top of the market
Top,
again,
yeah,
which is
of course.
controlled. And
Yeah.
so it's not top dollar by any means. You're not making a killing off this. You're able to make a profit of which you probably should be. And I think that going back to that one article that we were talking about on the earlier part, we used to get about 51.5% return
Oh, right.
for
That
on
was
the animal, and now we're down to like 37%. I think
36%. Yeah. I mean,
36. Okay.
you've dropped you've dropped 15% over, I think it was the course of 20 years is what
Right.
they said.
And most of that is market suppression
Right.
and increased cost to produce.
Right.
So I think most of it's market suppression though. So anyway, yeah, that's been a great thing. And I've had a number of people ask us, and they're like desperate. Hey, do you sell to people? I said, well, you got to understand what you're asking to purchase. It isn't just like, we have all these cattle here and they're all ready to go to market. That's
Yeah.
not the case. And you tell them, they're like, oh,
It's process.
yeah. And they're like, you know what? But here's the one other thing that it did, from producer to consumer direct is great. I love that. The only problem with it is, as you alluded to for the other was, we've got a burgeoning, once again, local butcher type, and it is a profession. Don't kid yourself. That is hard work.
Well,
That
that
is
was my
not
second.
easy work.
That was my follow-up point is it's created butchers into being
Well,
a very high quality skill right now that people
right.
are like, oh, I need a butcher.
Right. Well, there's probably some low quality or lower quality. I would imagine that there's a large disparity between the really good ones and the ones that are just starting and really don't know what they're doing. But I'll bet you even the ones that really don't know what they're doing are going to get better very, very quickly. And they're going to, if they're smart, they're asking questions, they're learning. And the part of that I really like is that your consumer trusts, one, the person they're buying that beef from. They want to know, they're going to learn a little bit more about it, because your producer, we're a bunch of talkers. We like to talk about what we do with our beef. This is how it's raised. This is how it's treated. This is what we do with it. This is the grass that it's on. It gets fresh spring water flowing all the time. It gets the best mineral. I mean, you'll tell them what is in their beef and what's not. They like that. I think that's important. The other part of that is, now they've got a butcher that they trust. They say, hey, I can get this thing cut up. Oh, I want a 2-inch steak. I want a, yeah, they'll do that for me. And I'm not going to charge me any more for that than they will cut a 1-inch steak, because it's custom cut. And fact is, it takes less time for that butcher to process a 2-inch steak
Right.
off of a loin than it does a 1-inch, because they're doing less cuts, less wrapping, and if that's your fancy, if that's what you want. If you want all hamburger, that's an easy one for them too. They debone that animal and grind it to your spec, whatever percent fat you want added to it, so it sticks together, and package it. Done. Very, very easy. Here's the problem with it. It has created a shortage of butchers, even though there are a lot of them that are getting in the game, and I am glad for them. And I really hope that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
That continues, but you're a year out to get an animal processed. So
Right.
that'll catch up. Then there's going to be some people who go, you know what, I did that once. Yeah, and the problem with it was I had to store an entire beef for a year, and I had to go buy a freezer. And yeah, we like these cuts, but I'm not much for oxtail soup and the stew meats and stuff. So they don't utilize the stuff. They utilize all the hamburger and the steaks and maybe some roasts. So learning how to prepare it, it's a great thing. And I think there was a lot more of that. The beef sales were up, direct beef sales. And like you said, and one of the things that the Packers meant or said on this previous part of this was, cattle consumption was lower. No, it actually wasn't. During COVID,
it's been
beef
increasing.
sales was up. It increased because people were staying home and they were learning how to cook things. They were experimenting and they were cooking for themselves instead of going out and having their pizzas or hamburgers. They were getting cuts of meat and trying different things and finding out that guess what, they liked it. So being able to in a way sustain themselves even in a very urban setting, you can do that. That's great. That's a really good thing. Why not do that more? So that's going to be a high tide right now that we're riding for those that are able to support consumers who want direct from a ranch to their table. That's good. That will wane a little bit, I think, because old habits are hard to break. Others will continue to do it. That's good. Let's hope that levels out instead of has all of the highs and lows, because that also brings in instability to
and butchering's
people
it's become such a big deal that I know Montana has been it was doing some legislation earlier this year. It's something I want. It's in the queue for a discussion for us, but I don't remember what its acronym was, but there was an acronym that was created for legislation in Montana specifically to bolster the butcher infrastructure within the state, because they noticed that there was a shortage of butchers within Montana, and we're sending a lot of our meat out of the state to get it processed, and then a good portion of that is coming right back into the state. So we're ending up becoming consumers of the very stuff we are producing, and we could just be doing it all right here. So there's something there that the state legislature was saying, hey, we need to fix this, and I need to look into it some more so we can discuss. But yeah, I think the increase in butchers and the processing of animals at the local level has become a very, very big deal. Not just for Montana, but a lot of other agricultural states as well.
Yeah, I think maybe what you're referring to is the state and then the federal USDA inspections in order to move meat across state lines or within the state.
No,
from
it was
local
something
butcher
different.
shops. Nope.
Yep, they were looking. Montana State was looking to. There were incentives to get up and coming butchers up and running. Utilizing previously constructed butcher shops and restructuring them to meet specifications, like federal regulations.
Meet some EPA regs and all that kind of stuff, and maybe loosening some of that stuff.
Well, it wasn't loosening. It was to help essentially subsidize and to ensure that everything was to spec so that people could come in and just start cutting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I need.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Either I knew it or heard it and okay, that's a good thing, and went on, but it's good.
And then finally, as we've already discussed, I think meat packers were kind of exposed for some of the things they did, because people were like, I don't have a job. I can't pay for my food. Why is food so expensive? And I think that was kind of a benefit to COVID as well. As we wrap this up, is just to say, hey, it's not just farmers and ranchers that are getting hurt either. It's the consumer as well.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good thing, but unfortunately, look what it took to be able to get that awareness up there.
Yeah, it took
You
a
know,
a worldwide essentially recession for a year.
again, yeah, and again, we personalize stuff before we start asking a question about it. It's like we have to hurt or be affected before we start looking
Yeah,
things over and going, "Ooh, why? Why
yeah,
is that?" So, no, it's a very good thing. I mean, there's uh, out of everything that you do, if you're smart, you look for the opportunity in it. Don't
hmm
just bitch about it. And we're bitching about some of these things that we can't control because there's no opportunity there. I mean, which I wish there was. Um, there are some on the fringe edges that we will explore as our own family ranch, and we're looking at those things now. We won't share them yet, but you have to be, again, flexible and change with the times a little bit, diversify, do some different things in order to stay viable. And it isn't that we would want to do that; it's that we're maybe going to be forced to do that, and
yeah,
hopefully, even those will not be in vain.
yeah. I mean, and kind of like you said, uh, it takes hurting in order to kind of notice where things are maybe lacking. So in this sense, it's a forcing function from the outside, external forces to us that are making us adapt and overcome to try and be successful.
Yeah, and when you stop trying to improve your situation, and you should always be trying to improve your
Right.
situation, even when you're fat, look at your situation. Can I improve this? Too many of us are able to go, you know what? I don't feel like I hurt. So yeah, we'll just keep doing what we're doing because it isn't going to take any more energy to do that. And that's when you can get bit. And
Right.
that's just the way it is. So always look to improve your situation. Look for the opportunity there.
So just to kind of wrap up this episode, hearings are still going on. Don't know what's going to really come of it when it comes to meat packers and antitrust stuff. But there were some half truths, not so half truths from the meatpacking industry. They can improve too, not just us. COVID positives, we got some, I think people are kind of understanding the process of food in general a little bit better. Telecommunication, of course, also being able to get that direct consumer to producer aspect. And then, of course, we just talked about for a little while was the increase in butchers and their abilities to produce for not only agriculture states, but all across the country. So with that, I'll give it to Dave.
Well, I guess there's only one thing left to say. We thank you till you're better paid.